So without further ado, I am pleased to invite onto the stage the Vice Chair of the National Economic Council and Special Envoy of the President of Indonesia for International Trade and Multilateral Cooperation, Ms. Mari Elka Pangestu. Please give a round of applause.
Good morning, everyone. Happy to be here. Pak Sofyan and the board of IBC, thank you for inviting me for this session and giving me, I think, quite a hard task to explain to you in the 15 minutes that I have why the private sector matters. So I wonder if you could put up the slides, please. Okay. Let me start with the obvious. Why the private sector matters is because most of the investments that are coming into our country, so this is a number that shows the gross fixed capital formation by institutions. It comes from the GDP numbers. So when you look at GDP numbers and look at investment contribution to GDP, that's the number that's called the gross fixed capital formation. And you can see that on average, the private sector accounts for almost 90% of total investments. So we always say the private sector matters, but it's good to have a number, right? And the SOE is growing, but still a small portion. And actually, government spending in terms of the investment contribution is still small compared to the private sector. So I just wanted to make this obvious point and say that I think a number of the panelists, as well as I'm sure Pak Erlangga earlier and Pak Arshad earlier, if we want to have higher growth, whether it's 6%, whether it's 8%, and create jobs, the key is creating jobs and decent jobs. We need to increase private sector investment. But it's not just the quantity of investment that matters, but how that investment increases productivity. And so this is really the big challenge in terms of what is the role of the private sector. And we have an opportunity here that we need to align our development pathways so that we're not just having high growth. I think Eric, if I'm not mistaken, mentioned it earlier. Green, nature. Within that, there's actually the opportunity for investment. What you want is growth which is green or sustainable, resilient, that can have a climate aspect as well as resilient in terms of making sure you address distribution issue, you're creating decent jobs, you're having an inclusive growth. So really, this is the challenge for us. And it's a challenge, but it's an opportunity. For the last 25 years, as Raden pointed out, our growth has been at 5%. It hasn't been able to get up to above 5% because we have been depending on low value added sectors and very limited productivity gains, partly because we are a lucky country. We have so many natural resources. A lot of our growth has been driven by natural resources. And we all have been talking about the middle income trap. How can we boost higher growth in the next 5 years to escape the middle income trap? And this transition in terms of the climate change and the energy transition and so on that we must enable and sustainable infrastructure is actually a growth story. It's an investment story and a growth story, apart from other new sectors that I think Mary mentioned about AI and digital and so on. So this is the opportunity, this is the possibility that we should be able to achieve. And this is what we hope the government is going to be focusing on. Not just the 8% growth, but making sure that it's green, resilient, and inclusive. Because otherwise, you will have pushback, you will have resistance, you will have tensions. And now that's the obvious. That's what I would say. That's what my starting point is. Now, what are the challenges? The challenges for us to increase our productivity, I put this in just one picture, but most of you here are from the private sector. This has been, I guess, an ongoing conversation, ongoing dialogue that we have been having. that a lot of the issues with the decline of our productivity is because of a lot of issues with domestic market inefficiencies coming from the investment climate, the cost of doing business, the lack of competition policy, legal certainty, consistency of policies, you name it. I think we're all very familiar with the list of issues that are happening. And it's causing us to have a decline in our productivity. There are many reports being written on this, so I think I will not spend too much time detailing that. The other challenge is what was already talked about just then in the panel. Global uncertainty has gone up. I mean, it declined slightly in 2025, but it remains very high compared to previous times. And this only goes to October 2025. If you have 2026 there, I'm sure first 3 weeks of 2026, you would see it go up. And we all know the list of issues of the uncertainties in trade, shifts in supply chain, the slowdown in China's economy is actually going to affect us. And we have geopolitical uncertainties. And this is where the first 3 weeks of this year has been yet another big wake-up call. We talked about the weaponization of the use of economic instruments for security reasons all of the last few years. But it's been not confined, but has been kind of an anti-China, contain China in semiconductors, in critical minerals. But it's taken a different meaning today. It's a real weaponization, using tariffs to say whether you're with us or not with us in terms of Greenland issue or in terms of other issues, which are real security intervention issues. So it's getting to not just WTO, but UN conventions. At the same time, we're still facing challenges of climate change, digital disruption, and food security. So those are the challenges. But guess what? I think the previous panel actually already outlined a lot of this. With challenges comes opportunities. With shifts in global value chain or the reinvention of globalization, what you're seeing with the geopolitics and the fragmentation, we did a survey of the private sector last year in the context of the ASEAN Geoeconomics Report. And they said what were they worried most about was fragmentation, economic fragmentation because of the supply chain being disrupted with geopolitics. Second, the fear of increased imports from China and third countries as they find new markets because they can't export to the US. And third was the emergence of blocks, trading blocks. So these are the three concerns, and therefore it's an opportunity for us by which I think I'm quite proud, ASEAN did respond by saying, okay, we've got to strengthen ASEAN. We've got to strengthen what's in front of us, which is the ASEAN economic integration, plus the RCEP, which includes Japan, Korea, China, and Australia and New Zealand. And we also did what we could to extend the markets. So the way to respond to this uncertainty, which is not going to go away, is actually can be getting worse. The uncertainty is there to stay. So you have to not be responding business as usual. The usual way you respond to high risk is to diversify. So you diversify your partners, your trading partners with the EU. We also, I think, acceding to the OECD, as mentioned by Raden. And here are some of the recent key bilateral FTAs that we've signed. Indonesia, EU, CEPA, and then with EU, and Canada, as well as the ongoing negotiations with the US. All of them have potential market access opening up for certain sectors, and these are opportunities for the reconfiguration of supply chain. So how do we get Indonesia becomes an attractive location, and it should be the growth, part of the growth story of the 8% that we desire. And the good news is that our survey that we did last year said that firms actually plan to invest in ASEAN in the next 12 months. 60% basically said we're still continuing to expand in ASEAN as we respond by relocating, by diversifying, by doing multi-sourcing and so on. And because we still have competitive cost, market size, and growth, and labor. And I think it was 70 or 75% said they were confident they could adjust and be agile to the supply chain shifts by doing dual sourcing, increasing inventory, using technology wisely so that they can become more efficient, and so on. So companies are responding, and they said that they learned from the COVID experience how to be agile in the supply chain. So these are kind of the opportunities. So there's urgency, there's opportunity. What needs to be done? And I just want to use the word Indonesia Incorporated, which was, I think, Shinta revived that term when the president met with all of the private sector last year. But it's really what Arshad was mentioning at the beginning. How does private sector and government cooperate to make sure that we can realize these opportunities, right? And this was in March, so before April 2nd reciprocal tariffs. We did have a meeting with the president to emphasize to him the urgency of deregulation and reforms. At that time, we were saying that we are going to sign the EU-Indonesia CEPA. There are issues in there that require us to do reforms, especially on import licensing and non-tariff barriers. And he was all on board. And then April 2nd happened. Then we had the town hall in April. Many of you probably remember that, where the president committed to doing the deregulation and reforms. If you take a look at that cobweb picture, it shows you the red is the best in the Be Ready World Bank survey of firms, of how firms perceive the investment climate or business climate. At business entry and international trade, we are the furthest from the best practice. Competition, a little bit better, and labor, a little bit better. But this is where business location and utility services, once you open up, the things that you face when you're operating your business are coming on this side. Therefore, this is just defining to us what are the areas that need to be addressed in terms of deregulation and reforms if we really want investment, growth, and jobs. Nothing new to this audience, but I think, let me close with this slide. We know what to do. This is, I think, I have been in this business with Pak Sofian. I think we have been at this for several decades, maybe, showing my age. We know what to do. What we don't know how to do is to get re-elected once we have done it. So this comes from a very famous quote from Jean-Claude Juncker, who was the head of the ECB. So it's emphasizing we know what to do. What I listed to you is what IBC, in many of its policy notes, have also been advocating. But how do we get it done? And what should be the role of Indonesia Incorporated? I really hope that the business sector, through IBC, through other venues, can continue to have the drum roll that this is what we need to do if we want to have investment, if we want to have growth. And the deregulation and reforms shouldn't really just be our usual international trade restrictions to be reduced and improving the investment license. We do have to focus on the green element, which is about growth. I think it's the new growth story, including also we deal with AI and digital and so on. And let's not forget the social. How do we make sure that there are reforms on how we deal with the social issues? For instance, at the National Economic Council, we are improving the way we are going to deliver cash transfer, following the Indian example of digital public infrastructure, so that you're targeting who is getting the social and cash transfer. Implementation and coordination, classic issue. We need to continue discussing this, how to best do it. And pragmatism, and then balancing between good policies and political economy. And a big issue that we are having discussions on today, I just put it there without going to say how we should be approaching it, between state-led and market-driven. I think we're back to discussing this, yeah, Pak Sofian. And I hope that IBC and all of you here can have a good discussion on that and give good input. And then bold and gradual reforms. I've become practical and pragmatic. Let's go where we can, let's reform where we can, and hope that it can generate its own momentum. But we need to start, we need to go where we can and reform where we can. But finally, the importance of the role of Indonesia Incorporated. So it should be government and private sector and all the stakeholders coming together to make sure that we can grow at 8%, but in a green growth as well as resilient and inclusive. Thank you, and I hope I've been able to at least excite you a little bit with the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ibu Mahri Elka Pangestu, please once again, ladies and gentlemen, give a round of applause to Ibu Mahri Elka Pangestu.